3 haunting true thunderstorm horror stories from stormy nights. Story 1, The Lightning at the Window. The rain hammered against the roof of our new ranch house like 1,000 tiny fists demanding to be let in. I stood in the kitchen watching my 3-year-old son Tommy press his face against the living room window, with the kind of wonder only a child can have. Each flash of lightning turned his small silhouette into a shadow puppet on the bare walls. We had just moved to this quiet suburban neighborhood 2 weeks ago. The moving boxes still sat unpacked in corners, and the rooms felt hollow and empty without furniture to fill them. This was supposed to be our fresh start. After the divorce a year ago, things had been rough on both of us. But here in this peaceful neighborhood with its white picket fences and friendly neighbors waving from their porches, I felt like we could finally breathe again. The thunderstorm felt like nature's way of washing away all the pain and starting clean. At least that is what I told myself as I watched Tommy jump and squeal with each boom of thunder. It took me nearly 2 hours to get him settled down and into bed that night. His little body was buzzing with excitement from the storm. Even after I tucked him in and read him 3 bedtime stories, I could hear him giggling in his room. Eventually, the house went quiet except for the rain tapping against the windows. I poured myself a beer and sat in the dark living room feeling grateful that we had made it here, that we had survived. The next morning I found Tommy sitting up in his bed with the biggest smile on his face. His brown eyes were bright and happy. He could barely contain his excitement as he announced in his tiny voice that he had watched the lightning at his window all night long. I laughed and ruffled his messy hair, telling him that was wonderful. Kids and their imagination, right? I figured he had dreamed about the storm and confused it with reality. But then a few days later he said it again at breakfast. I was pouring orange juice when he told me very matter-of-factly that he watched the lightning at his window again. I frowned and looked outside at the clear blue sky. There had been no storm the night before. The weather had been perfectly calm. I told him gently that he must have been dreaming. He looked confused for a moment and then nodded slowly like he was trying to convince himself I was right. It became a regular thing after that. At least twice a week, Tommy would tell me about watching the lightning outside his bedroom window. Sometimes he would describe it in detail. He said it was really bright and made his whole room glow white. He said it happened over and over again, flash after flash after flash. I kept assuring him it was just dreams. Just his brain replaying that first exciting thunderstorm we had experienced when we moved in. Looking back now, I hate myself for not seeing it. Everyone keeps telling me there was no way I could have known. The police said it. The therapist said it. Even my sister said it. But their words feel empty and useless. I am Tommy's father. I am supposed to protect him from monsters. I am supposed to know when something is wrong. But I just brushed it off as childhood dreams and imagination. The morning I found out the truth started like any other Tuesday. I made coffee in our small kitchen and grabbed the newspaper from the front porch. The sun was just coming up and the neighborhood was quiet. I sat down at the kitchen table and unfolded the paper. My stomach dropped when I saw the headline on the front page. Local man arrested for child predator charges. The headline screamed in bold black letters. My hands started shaking as I read the article. Police had arrested a man who lived just 3 blocks away from our house. They said he had been stalking children in the neighborhood for months. His method was sick and calculated. He would choose a victim, usually a young boy, and watch them for weeks. He would learn their schedule and their habits, and then late at night when everyone was asleep, he would creep into their yards. The article said he would stand outside bedroom windows and take pictures of the children while they slept. He used a camera with a bright flash, sometimes dozens of photos in one night. Flash, flash, flash. The article went on to say that in some cases he had done more than just take pictures. My hands crushed the newspaper as rage and horror flooded through my body. I walked slowly to Tommy's bedroom, trying to keep calm. He was still asleep, curled up under his dinosaur blankets. I looked at his window. From the outside, someone could easily see into his room. Our house sat on a corner lot with bushes along the side that would provide perfect cover for someone lurking in the darkness. I felt sick. When Tommy woke up later that morning, he came padding into the kitchen in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. I picked him up and held him tight, probably too tight because he squirmed a little. I asked him very carefully about the lightning at his window. I asked him to describe exactly what he saw. He told me it was really, really bright. So bright it hurt his eyes a little. He said it came from right outside his window. Sometimes just a few flashes, sometimes many flashes in a row. He said he could see a dark shape outside when the light went off, but he could not tell what it was. He thought maybe it was a tree. My blood ran cold. I asked him when was the last time he saw the lightning. He thought for a moment, chewing on his lip like he always did when he was concentrating. Then his face lit up with a smile. He told me cheerfully that he had not seen any lightning at his window for about a week now. He seemed happy about this, like it was good news. Then his expression changed. He leaned in close to me like he was telling me a secret. He whispered that now the lightning was not at his window anymore. Before I could feel relieved, he said something that made my heart stop. He told me the lightning had moved. Now it was coming from inside his closet. I set him down gently and walked over to his bedroom closet. My hands were shaking as I opened the door. Inside, among his clothes and toys and boxes, I found scratches on the inside wall, like someone had been trying to claw their way through from the outside. Later, the police would tell me that the man had attempted to break into our house through the crawl space that connected to Tommy's closet. He had been in our walls. The police took my statement and went through the evidence they had collected from the predator's house. They said he had hundreds of photos. They asked me if I wanted to see the ones of Tommy. I said no. I could not bring myself to look at them. I did not want those images burned into my brain. The detective told me Tommy had been one of his primary targets. They found photos dating back almost to the day we moved into the house. Flash after flash after flash captured in the darkness of night while my son slept. The man is in prison now awaiting trial. We moved out of that house within a month. We live in an apartment now on the 3rd floor, where nobody can look through the windows from outside. Tommy seems okay. He does not talk about the lightning anymore. His therapist says kids are resilient and that he will probably be fine with time and support. But I see the way he checks his closet before bed now, and I hear him wake up sometimes in the night. As for me, I do not sleep much anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see flashes of light. I think about all those nights when Tommy was telling me about the lightning, and I dismissed it as dreams. I think about that monster standing outside my son's window with his camera, standing there in the dark, watching, taking pictures, planning God knows what else. I think about how the lightning moved from the window to the closet, about those scratches on the wall, about how close we came to something so much worse. I think about the sound of Tommy's voice telling me cheerfully that there was no more lightning at his window. I think about how happy he sounded, how innocent and trusting, how he thought the lightning was just lightning. Sometimes late at night I stand in Tommy's doorway and watch him sleep. I make sure his window is locked. I make sure his closet door is closed. I make sure he is safe, but I know now that monsters are real. They do not hide under beds or in closets like the ones in storybooks. The real monsters hide in plain sight. They live 3 blocks away in quiet neighborhoods with white picket fences. And sometimes they carry cameras that flash like lightning in the night. Story 2. The Gold Coin. Margaret Ashford had always been afraid of storms. Ever since she was a little girl, the sound of thunder made her heart race and her hands shake. It was an irrational fear, she knew, but fears do not care about logic. So when the thunderstorm rolled in that October evening, it was no surprise to anyone that she retreated to her library, the grand room with its floor-to-ceiling. Bookshelves and heavy velvet curtains made her feel safe, protected. She was 73 years old and had lived alone in the Ashford mansion for the past 5 years since her husband died. The house was far too big for one person. It had 12 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms and a ballroom that had not been used in decades. But it was her family home passed down through generations, and she could not bring herself to sell it. Besides, she liked the solitude, the quiet, the memories that lived in every room. That night she sat in her favorite leather chair by the library fireplace trying to read. But the storm was getting worse. Rain lashed against the tall windows and the wind howled like something alive and angry. Every few minutes lightning would flash, illuminating the library in stark white light, followed seconds later by thunder that shook the walls. Margaret tried to focus on her book, but her hands trembled as she turned the pages. She had sent her housekeeper home early that afternoon when the weather started turning bad. She did not want the poor woman driving in dangerous conditions. So now Margaret was completely alone in the massive house with only the storm for company. She told herself she would be fine. She had survived storms before. This was no different. But deep down she knew she was lying to herself. This storm felt different somehow. It felt wrong. Around midnight the thunder was constant. It rolled across the sky like drums in some ancient ritual. Margaret set down her book and gripped the arms of her chair. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She tried to take deep breaths, but panic was building in her chest. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely, leaving her in darkness. Margaret gasped and stood up, knocking over her reading lamp. She fumbled in the dark, trying to find the table where she kept her candles. Lightning flashed again through the windows, casting wild shadows across the room. For just a second in that flash of light, she thought she saw something. A figure standing in the corner of the library. Watching her, she screamed and stumbled backward. Her legs hit the coffee table and she lost her balance, falling hard onto the oriental rug. Pain shot through her hip and back. Thunder exploded directly overhead, so loud it felt like the house might split in two. Margaret tried to catch her breath, tried to calm down. She told herself there was nothing there. It was just shadows. Just her frightened mind playing tricks. But then lightning flashed again. And there in the corner she saw it clearly. A woman standing perfectly still. Her face was pale and her eyes were wide open, staring directly at Margaret. The woman's mouth was open like she was screaming, but no sound came out. She wore an old-fashioned dress, dark and wet, like she had been walking in the rain. And her eyes. Oh God, her eyes were terrible. They were too wide, too staring. They did not blink even when the lightning faded and darkness returned. Margaret's heart seized in her chest. The pain was immediate and crushing. She clutched at her chest, gasping for air, but her lungs would not work. The room spun around her. She tried to crawl toward the door, tried to call for help, but only a weak wheeze came out. Another flash of lightning. The woman was closer now, just a few feet away, still staring with those horrible, unblinking eyes. The last thing Margaret Ashford saw before her heart stopped completely was the woman's face. In that final flash of lightning, she recognized her. It was herself. Her own face staring back at her. Her own eyes wide with terror. The fear was the last thing she felt. The last thing she knew. And then nothing. They found her the next morning when the housekeeper arrived for work. The storm had passed and the sun was shining through the library windows, making everything look peaceful and normal. But Margaret was dead. She sat slumped in her chair near the fireplace. Her book had fallen to the floor, and her eyes were wide open, frozen in an expression of pure terror. The coroner said it was a heart attack brought on by the stress of the storm. He said it was common for people with anxiety to have cardiac events during frightening situations. Nothing unusual about it medically speaking, but when they tried to close her eyes for the funeral, they would not stay shut. Every time they pressed her eyelids down, they would slowly drift open again. It was unsettling, everyone agreed, but sometimes bodies do strange things after death. Finally, the funeral director came up with a solution. He placed 2 gold coins over her eyes, heavy old coins from her late husband's collection. They were valuable and beautiful with intricate designs. The weight kept her eyelids closed. Problem solved. She looked peaceful in her casket, dignified, like she was just sleeping. The funeral was small and quiet. Margaret had outlived most of her friends and had no children. After the service, they buried her in the family plot next to her husband. The cemetery was old and elegant with tall oak trees and marble headstones. The grave digger was a young man named Rick, who had only been working there for a few months. He did his job professionally and efficiently, but after he lowered Margaret's casket into the ground and began shoveling dirt over it, he paused. He looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then he climbed down into the grave. He knew from the funeral director that the old woman had been buried with gold coins over her eyes. Real gold, probably worth a few $100s each, maybe more. Rick needed money. His girlfriend was pregnant and they were barely making rent. He opened the casket lid. Margaret's body lay there in her dark blue funeral dress. The gold coins glinted in the afternoon sun. Rick reached out and carefully lifted one coin, then the other. He pocketed them quickly, but as he was about to close the casket again, he made the mistake of looking at her face. Her eyes were open, wide open, staring up at him. Rick jumped back and nearly fell out of the grave. He stared at her for a long moment, his heart racing. It must have happened when he removed the coins. The weight had been keeping them closed. Now they were open again, and God, they looked so real, so alive, like she was looking right at him, right into him. A chill ran down Rick's spine. Those eyes were terrifying. They looked so frightened, so desperate. He could not leave her like that. It felt wrong. So he took the coins out of his pocket and placed them back over her eyes. Then he closed the casket lid and climbed out of the grave. He finished burying her quickly, working faster than normal. He wanted to get away from that grave as fast as possible. That night, Rick could not sleep. He kept thinking about those eyes, about the way they had stared at him. He tossed and turned in bed until his girlfriend finally asked what was wrong. He told her nothing, just a long day. But he could not shake the feeling that something bad was coming. Around 3 in the morning, Rick woke up. He was not sure what woke him. The apartment was dark and quiet. His girlfriend snored softly beside him, but something felt off, wrong. The air felt thick and cold. He sat up in bed, and that is when he heard it. A voice, a woman's voice, soft and distant, like it was coming from far away. It was calling out, asking a question. "Where is the man who took my gold coins?" the voice asked. "Where are you? Come out, come out." Rick froze. His blood turned to ice. It was just his imagination, just stress and guilt making him hear things. But then the voice came again, closer this time. "Where's the man who took my gold coins? I know you are here. Come out, come out." He could hear footsteps now. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving through his apartment, coming down the hallway toward his bedroom. The voice kept repeating the same words over and over, getting louder each time. "Where's the man who took my gold coins? Where are you? Come out, come out." Rick wanted to scream, wanted to run, but he could not move. He was paralyzed with terror. The footsteps stopped right outside his bedroom door. There was a long moment of silence. Rick held his breath. And then the door flew open, slamming against the wall. Lightning flashed outside his window. In that brief moment of light, Rick saw her. Margaret Ashford stood in his doorway. Her funeral dress hung wet and muddy on her thin frame. Her hair was wild and tangled with bits of dirt and leaves. And her eyes. Her eyes were wide open, staring at him with that same terrible expression of fear. But there was something else there now, too. Rage, pure rage. She opened her mouth impossibly wide and screamed one word at him. There you are. They found Rick the next morning. His girlfriend had woken up and found him lying beside her in bed. He was dead. The police said it was probably a heart attack or maybe a brain aneurysm, something sudden and fatal. But his eyes were wide open, and his face was frozen in an expression of absolute terror, just like Margaret Ashford's had been. The funeral director who had buried Margaret heard about Rick's death. He heard about the gold coins that the police found in Rick's apartment. Coins that matched the description of ones he had placed over Margaret Ashford's eyes. He went to the cemetery and checked her grave. Everything looked normal, undisturbed. But something made him uneasy. Years later, after the funeral director had retired, he would sometimes tell people the story after too many drinks. He would say that he went back to that cemetery one night, that he opened Margaret Ashford's grave just to be sure, just to check. And when he opened her casket, he said her eyes were closed. The gold coins were gone, but she was smiling. Not the peaceful smile of death. Something else. Something satisfied. Story 3. The flash in the closet. The move was supposed to be good for us. That is what I kept telling myself as I unpacked boxes in our new house. After the divorce, my daughter Emma and I needed a fresh start. The house was small but cozy. 2 bedrooms, a little backyard, quiet neighborhood, perfect for a single dad trying to figure out how to raise a 9-year-old girl on his own. Emma seemed to like it. She had picked out purple paint for her bedroom, and we spent a whole Saturday painting together. She hung up posters of her favorite bands and arranged her stuffed animals on her bed. For the first time in months, I saw her smile. Really smile. Not the sad fake smile she had been giving me since her mom left. This was real. This was hope. The thunderstorm hit on our second week there. It was a big one. The kind that makes the whole house shake. Emma had always loved storms. While other kids hid under blankets, she would press her face to the window and watch the lightning. That night she was so excited she could barely sleep. I must have tucked her in 3 times before she finally settled down. The next morning I found her at the kitchen table eating cereal. She was practically bouncing in her chair. "Dad," she said, "I saw the most amazing lightning last night. It was right outside my window." I smiled and asked her how many times she saw it flash. She thought for a moment. "Maybe 20 times," she said. "Maybe more. It was so bright." A few days later she mentioned it again. She said she saw the lightning at her window the previous night. I frowned. There had not been a storm. The weather had been clear. I told her she must have been dreaming. She insisted she was awake, that she saw it. I laughed it off. Kids and their imaginations. But then it became a regular thing. Every few days, Emma would tell me about seeing lightning outside her window. She would describe it in detail. How bright it was. How it made her whole room glow. How it happened over and over again. Flash. 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 I started to worry that she was having nightmares or trouble sleeping. I asked her if everything was okay at school, if she was still upset about the divorce. She said she was fine. She said the lightning was real. I was working from home one afternoon when Emma came to my office. She looked troubled. Her face was scrunched up the way it got when she was trying to figure something out. She asked me why the lightning only happened in her room, why she never saw it anywhere else in the house. I did not have a good answer for that. That night after I tucked her in, I stood in her doorway for a while just watching her. She fell asleep quickly, curled up under her blankets. I walked over to her window and looked outside. The neighborhood was quiet. Streetlights glowed softly. A few houses had porch lights on. Everything was normal, peaceful, but something felt wrong. I could not put my finger on it. The next morning, Emma seemed different, quieter. She picked at her breakfast without eating much. I asked what was wrong. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes and said the lightning had moved. It was not at her window anymore. I felt a strange sense of relief. "Good," I said. "Maybe it was just a phase." She shook her head slowly. "No, Dad," she said. "You do not understand. It moved. It is in my closet now." My stomach dropped. I do not know why, but those words filled me with dread. I asked her what she meant. She explained that the night before she had woken up and seen flashes of light coming from her closet. The door was closed, but light was seeping out from the cracks. Flash, 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 just like before. I went to her room and opened her closet. It was normal. Clothes hanging on a rod, shoes on the floor, some boxes of toys stacked in the corner. Nothing unusual. I checked the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Everything seemed fine. I told Emma there was nothing to worry about. But she just looked at me with this expression I could not read. She said, "Okay, Dad." But I could tell she did not believe me. That night I could not sleep. I kept thinking about what Emma had said. About the lightning moving from her window to her closet. It did not make sense, but something about it bothered me. Around 2 in the morning, I got out of bed and walked down the hallway to Emma's room. Her door was slightly open. I stood there in the dark listening to her breathing. She was asleep. Everything was quiet. I was about to turn and go back to bed when I saw it. A flash of light. It came from inside her closet. Brief but bright. My heart started pounding. I waited, nothing, then another flash. And another. I walked quickly to her closet and threw the door open. At first I did not see anything, just clothes and boxes. Then I looked closer. There was a gap between the wall and the closet frame, a space that should not have been there. I pulled some of Emma's clothes aside and saw it. A hole. Someone had cut through the drywall from the other side. My hands were shaking as I pulled at the drywall. It came away easily, revealing a dark crawl space behind the wall. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, showing old wooden beams and insulation. And something else. Something that made my blood run cold. There was a camera set up in the crawl space. It was pointing through the hole directly at Emma's room. Directly at her bed. I could see a wire running from the camera deeper into the crawl space. There were marks on the walls. Fresh scratches. Like someone had been crawling through there regularly. I called the police immediately. They came quickly and searched the entire crawl space. They found more cameras. They found photos. Dozens of photos. The detective explained that our house had been targeted by someone who had been stalking the previous residents. A family with 2 young daughters. When they moved out, the stalker must have waited to see who moved in next. And then he saw Emma. The hole in the closet had been his most recent work. Before that, he had been taking photos from outside, through her window. The flashes Emma saw were from his camera. The police said we were lucky. If Emma had not told me about the light moving to the closet, they might never have found him. He could have continued for months or worse. He might have eventually tried to take her. They caught the man 2 days later. He lived 4 houses down from us. He was a quiet neighbor who always waved and smiled. He had helped me carry groceries once when I saw him outside. The thought of him crawling through the walls of my house made me sick. The thought of him watching my daughter made me want to kill him. We moved out that weekend. I could not stay in that house knowing he had been in the walls, knowing he had been watching Emma sleep. We found an apartment downtown, small but safe, high up where nobody could look in the windows. Emma seems okay now. She does not talk about the lightning anymore. Her therapist says she is doing well considering everything. But sometimes late at night I wake up and check on her. I make sure her door is locked. I make sure her windows are locked. I make sure there are no spaces in the walls. No gaps, no holes. I think about how Emma tried to tell me, how she described the flashes of light and I dismissed it as dreams or imagination. I think about how close we came to something terrible. Emma said the lightning moved. She was right. It was never lightning at all. It was a monster with a camera hiding in the darkness, taking pictures of my daughter. Flash, 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 and I almost did not believe her. That is the part that haunts me most. My own daughter told me something was wrong and I almost did not listen. Almost did not see. Almost did not save her in time. Now when Emma talks, I listen. I listen to every word, because I learned the hard way that sometimes the scariest monsters are not in stories. They are not in movies. They are real. And they live in quiet neighborhoods where everyone waves and smiles. And sometimes they hide in the walls of your house, in the dark spaces where you cannot see them, watching, waiting, flashing their cameras like lightning on a stormy night.